Agua Vinho, which means water and wine, was originally written by Egberto Gismonti when he was quite a young man. These days it's performed mainly as an instrumental piece. It divides into two sections effectively. There's an A section which is often repeated. I don't repeat the A section. So I just play an A section and then a B section and then an A section again. The chords, the harmony, the chord progression in each section, the A section, the B section, the A section is the same. But in the B section there's usually an alternative or an improvised melody. The version that I play is by Daniel Wolfe, and it's a lovely arrangement of this piece, and all credit should be given to Daniel Wolfe for making the arrangement. It's really quite nice. The first thing that I might draw attention to is the use of inversions. Egberto Gismonti likes to use inverted chords, and he creates some beautiful coherent and beautiful bass lines. So an example of this is in bars 13 to 17. The texture of the piece is also worth noting. It's in three parts. What we've got is we've got the melody up at the top. We've got the bass line at the bottom with those inverted chords and repositioning chords. And in the middle we've got this third texture which is outlining the arpeggios and sort of driving the piece forward. And this is mostly in quavers. So a good example of this is in bars 8 to 21. Talking about my piece Celebrations Nupcias in my previous tutorial video, I mentioned this this tendency that Egberto Gismonti has to be a little bit ambiguous about whether he's playing in a major or a minor key. In that piece, that's in the key of E. But it's very, very difficult to say, as I mentioned in my video, to determine exactly what the key actually is. Because he keeps on throwing in both the third and the flat third, the major third and the minor third, all the way through the piece. What I forgot to mention in that piece, in fact, is that in the final chord, where you'd normally expect it to really resolve and really determine the key, Egberto Gismonti actually plays the third and the flat third in that chord at the same time. This piece is a little bit different in that it's clearly in the key of D minor. But nevertheless, in the piece itself, Egberto Gismonti sometimes puts these quite surprising D major chords in where you're not quite expecting them. Quite often a D major chord with a flattened sixth in there as well, which is tending to suggest an Aeolian major scale. So an example of that might be in bars 10 to 11. Egberto Gismonti has this very distinctive way of dealing with dominant seventh chords quite often in his pieces, and you can see it in this one. Normally we'd expect the dominant seventh chord to be an A7A as the root, C sharp as the third, E as the fifth, flat 7 would be G. But Egberto Gismonti often uses the suspended fourth D in there as well, but he uses the suspended seventh chord with those upper extensions, which in a minor key would be the flattened 9th and the flattened 13th normally. So some of the bites, some of the dissonance of those extensions, the flat 9 and the flattened 13th, are still there, but the overall effect of the chord is just softened slightly, and that gives this very, very distinctive sound to the dominant chord. When he does use the third, as he does in this piece occasionally, the third quite often goes into the bass, so you get A7, A7 flat 9 on C sharp, which gives this very, very smooth bass line, and again it gives the dominant chord a sort of a softer, less distinct feel to it somehow. There's also a very interesting passage in bars 17 to 22. So this is the this linking passage where you get these harmonics over these chords. So what you're getting is you're getting an A7th chord followed by one of those surprise D major chords as well. But what he does, I think very cleverly, when he plays the A7th chord, the harmonic at the top that's being played is an F sharp. And so that's the 13th of the A7th chord, which is kind of coming from the melodic minor, maybe the Dorian mode, depending on how you want to think about it. And then when he moves to the D chord, where you might be expecting a D minor, he plays that F sharp and the high harmonic again. And that, of course, is the third of the D chord, making it a D major chord. So that's a very nice, intriguing little passage there. You also get in bars 13 to 17, and then later on in the piece you get the same chord progression again. But what you get is this very, very interesting movement of chords. You get, firstly, it starts off that section. It starts off with a B flat major 7th, which is just the flattened 6th chord of D minor. So the next chord then goes to an E flat triad. So you've got in the bass, you've got this movement of a 4th or a 5th going to the E flat. And then the bass line moves down by a semitone, as we were talking about before, to this inverted B flat major 7th chord on D. So you get this movement of a 4th or a 5th, then down up to the E flat, then down a semitone to the B flat major 7th on D. And then it goes down a whole step again, descending to the C minor 6 chord. Now, that sequence there, B flat major 7, E flat triad, B flat major 7 on D, C minor 6, is tending to suggest a B Phrygian mode. So this, you could think about this as a modal parallel. You could also say, okay, well, he's in the key of D minor, and he's flattening the second to create a D Phrygian, D Phrygian, which is another way of thinking about it. But then we get to this next chord, and this next chord's interesting in itself. The way I've written it down in my own sheet is as an A flat sus2 on C flat. Now, the thing is that the C flat is the flattened third of an A flat minor chord. So another way of thinking about that is an inverted A flat minor chord with a 9th on the top. Both ways of thinking, both descriptions, they're only descriptions, but that's what's happening. So I tend to think of it as an A flat sus2 chord, the upper part, with this C flat in the bass. So if you think of that as an A flat minor chord, what Egberto Gismonti does then is really quite clever, because the next chord is a G minor chord, which is of course the minor 4th chord of D minor. So we're moving them back into D minor. But that movement, going down from the A flat minor to the G minor, is a semitone movement. So we get this lovely strong progression from B flat major 7, which is quite clearly in D minor, going to this E flat, going to the B flat major 7 on D, the C minor 6, all of which is tending to suggest this Phrygian mode. Then this A flat sus2 on C flat. Now that A flat sus2 on C flat is a tritone, a sharp 4 or a flattened fifth, away from the key of D minor. And then that resolves down by a half step, this very, very strong gravitational pull back down to that G minor chord again, which takes us back. That's chord 4 minor of D minor. That takes us back into D minor again. The last thing that I might mention in terms of the harmonic analysis of this piece is this use of the whole tone scale in the coda, which the final, this beautiful ascending, very, very enigmatic passage where we get this ascending scale which goes higher and higher and ends up with these very, very high harmonics here. And so this is bars 47 and 48. We get in the first part of that passage, we get a whole tone scale. So we get D, E, F sharp, G sharp, B flat or A sharp, C, and then the harmonic D, and then we get an E, and then F sharp. But then we get the last three notes are A and a B flat, and then the C, and then the D finally, last four notes. And those last four notes are from the D natural minor scale, and then that final D minor chord at the end. So that's quite lovely. So we get a whole tone scale for the first half of that sequence, and then it finishes off with this D Aeolian or natural minor scale to finish on that final D minor chord. Agua Vinho has a few passages that are quite technically tricky and will take a little bit of work and practice to get them right. An issue for all guitarists, I think, is this issue of articulation. There's a tendency amongst guitarists to, particularly where there's long stretches or shifts involved, to create a melody that is staccato. By that I mean where the notes aren't really properly attached to each other. Whereas what we really need, particularly in a piece like this, is where the articulation is legato, where all those notes are smoothly attached. So the contrast there might be something like this. If I play the passage like this, and obviously I'm probably exaggerating a little bit here, but just for illustration. Like that. Although I'm playing all the notes roughly in time, it sounds quite ugly. And the reason for that is because, particularly if I have to make these big stretches, it's very difficult to maintain that legato upper line whilst you're making the stretch. But nevertheless, you have to, as best as you can, you have to work for it to actually achieve that when you're playing it. So what you need to hold those notes on for as long as possible, even though sometimes it might even be a little bit uncomfortable. Like that. I should also mention the need, this is quite obvious, but it's always worth reminding yourself about, is that the melody has to stand out above the accompaniment, the chords, and the bass line. There's also this issue of large left hand shift. So the most obvious place here is after this C minor 6 chord here. So here, this is a nasty stretch. This chord from the C minor 6 here. To stretch that chord, what I'm doing is I'm barring on the 6th fret. The 3rd finger is on the 9th fret here on the 6th string. We've got the 2nd finger on the 8th fret of the 3rd string, the 4th finger on the 9th fret of the 2nd string, and then this bar stretching across to the E up at the top. This is quite a difficult movement. Now, I talked about some of these issues in my last video on Celebración G Nupcias. So if you want a little bit more detail, I don't want to spend too long on this now. But you might go back and look at that video where I talk about this in a little bit more detail. But just briefly to summarize, the first thing is that you need to be physically relaxed. And when I talk about relaxation in the body, I don't just mean the hands need to be relaxed. I mean the arms need to be relaxed, the shoulders, the face, the head, the torso, the legs, the toes, everywhere needs to be relaxed. And then that's very, very closely connected to the fact that you need to have good physical posture when you're playing. Because if you're distorting your posture as you're reaching for these chords, it's going to introduce tension, and that's going to cause you to miss these chords when you're playing. The other issue about posture is that you need to be able to visualize. So if I play that from this chord and I'm moving to this chord here, I'm visualizing the chord, and you can see this me doing this when I perform the piece. I need to visualize the chord in advance. It's no use me moving the hand and then trying to decide where to put the hand. I need to have a very, very clear idea of where I'm placing the fingers before I make the shift. So I visualize, and then when I'm moving position, I don't try and look over onto the neck. What I do is I look up at the side of the neck here, so that I'm not pushing the head forward and distorting my physical playing position, which can lead to problems with tension and cause me to miss the notes. So it's really a combination of all of these elements. Firstly, we've got the ability to relax, then to remain focused and visualize where the fingers are going, and then to pay attention to the posture. So not pushing the head forward over to look at the fingerboard, sitting back, shoulders relaxed, nice posture. And the reason for all of that is that when you make that movement, as you make that transition, the movement has to come from the whole body and with all of your concentration to make that. And obviously, if different parts of yourself are working against yourself, in terms of your posture, or you're tense, or you're not thinking properly, or you're not focusing properly, obviously that's where the mistakes creep in. The harmonics in this piece will also demand a certain amount of preparation and practice to get them right. There are two ways that harmonics are being played here. The first way is where we just play a single line of harmonics, and the second way is where we have to combine the harmonic with other notes as well. So if we're thinking about the single line, we might take the final passage of the piece in the coda, where we get this whole tone scale followed by this D Aeolian mode. So in this example here, we start off with fretted notes first, and what we need to do is we need to pay a lot of attention to both the left hand and the right hand. So when we play here with the fretted notes first, I'm starting off in the 7th position, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and then this A sharp or B flat with the first finger. Now when I play the C, I play the C with the 4th finger here, which allows me to stretch, and going back to what I was saying earlier, maintain a nice legato articulation there, so there's no gap between the notes here. Then land on the harmonic here, the D, like that. Now when I land on that D, what I'm doing is that with that right hand, I'm actually preparing the shape of the right hand before I touch down and play it. Because if that right hand isn't in the correct shape to actually touch that harmonic, I'm going to touch it at a funny angle, or the right hand's going to be tense, and I'm not going to actually be able to accurately hit that harmonic when I play it. So getting the shape in the right hand is just so important here. And also, as I was mentioning earlier, visualizing where you're going to touch down with that at the tip of that index finger on that 15th fret, with this finger here on the 3rd fret. So, touching down, shape the hand properly, and then a nice firm pluck with the ring finger here. And then, when I've played that harmonic there, then I move up 2 frets with this finger, because this finger now is playing on the 5th fret, so I come up to the corresponding 17th fret here. Then I move 2 frets with this finger, and I have to move 2 frets here. And again, this is fairly easy at this point, because I've still got the remnants of that fret here on that 19th fret. And then back to the 17th fret on the 1st string with this finger, and then the 5th fret here. And then the B flat with the 2nd finger here, moving up 1 fret with this finger here. Now, I'm getting into sort of some quite sort of obscure territory now, because now I have to visualize 2 frets above that to get this next note here. And then I have to visualize from that point another 2 frets to get the last harmonic here, before that final D minor chord. The other way that we need to play harmonics in this piece is when we combine the harmonic note with other notes as well. So for instance, in this passage here, like that, what we're doing is that when we get to this chord here, I'm playing the B flat with the thumb here, the middle finger is playing the open G string, and then the index finger is is touching the harmonic note, and the ring finger is plucking the harmonic. Now, what I find helpful when I'm playing harmonics like this is to focus on this middle finger plucking the central note. So here, when I've shaped my hand, as I was talking about a moment ago, I shape my hand in advance. But what I do is I really focus on that middle finger, because when that middle finger is on that correct string, I find that the rest of the fingers find the place more easily. So as I play here, the middle finger to that 3rd string, and then the rest of the harmonic is fairly easy after that. Middle finger and strike, and again, middle finger, strike the harmonic like that. Okay, so just again, that's about visualization, it's about relaxation, it's about shaping the hands properly, which comes from correct posture. All of those things are part and parcel of the same thing. So the last technical issue I'd like to talk about is bars 31 and 32, where we have to play 3 crotchet triplets on the top line and 2 crotchets at the bottom line, making up a whole bar of 2/4 time. So it goes something like this. So that's tricky, I mean, obviously with the harmonics in there as well. But what makes it particularly tricky, at least for some people, is the count. So the way that I normally tackle this when I'm teaching this to students is to just think in terms of fractions. So rather than thinking of 3/2, if we double 3, we get to 6/2. And what that means is that each of the triplets is 2 counts long. And then each of the crotchets underneath is 3 counts long. So at the top, if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then the triplets are going to be on 1, on 3, and on 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, giving us a triplet. And then underneath, the crotchets are going to be on 1, on 4. So then if my left hand is the crotchets and my right hand the triplets, then what we get is this. We get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we'll do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then a little bit quicker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And a bit quicker again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like that. So obviously what you do is you count that out loud. And practicing that and getting that coordinated. If you transfer that across to the hand, it's probably a good idea to do the same thing, but just pluck open strings. So, for example, I'll just pluck the 6th string and the 1st string and do the same thing now, but in the hand rather than in 2 hands. So now we get this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? So it's just 2 E's there. So again, if I speed that up, we get this. So think of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like that. Just to establish that rhythmic feel in the body. Now, by counting that, what happens is you gradually get the feel for the triplet. But something that I quite often do with people, which people feel very helpful, is to find a spoken phrase that actually articulates that rhythm. So a very common spoken phrase for 3/2 is to say the phrase "nice cup of tea." Now, Adam Neely actually did a marvellous tutorial lesson on how to improve your rhythm, and I'd recommend anybody to go and watch it because he gives a lot of very interesting information on the relationship between the spoken word and our perception and articulation of rhythm. So I'd refer you to Adam Neely on that point. It's very helpful. So this sort of fits in with what he was saying, really. This is something I was taught a long time ago, which I've always found helpful. So if I say the phrase "nice cup of tea," now I get this. Listen. So I'm thinking nice cup of tea, nice cup of tea. And I can speed that up now. And it's very comfortable. Nice cup of tea, nice cup of tea. But there you can hear at the bottom, you can hear the crotchet, and at the top you hear the crotchet triplet. If I was going to do this, I mean, it's more difficult again to do this in 4 time. So I'll just mention this. It's got nothing to do with this piece, but it's just helpful for you, so I mention this. If we were going to place 3 crotchet triplets in 4/4 time, what we'd get would be, the first thing is we'd have to count the bottom line in 4, but to give us 4 subdivisions, which would be on 1, 4, 7 and 10. So each one of those subdivisions, if it's a subdivision of 12, would be 1, 2, 3 for the first beat, 4, 5, 6 for the second beat, 7, 8, 9 for the third beat, and 10, 11, 12 for the fourth. So they're the crotchets at the bottom. At the top, to get the triplet feel over the 4, then the triplets are going to fall on 1, 5 and 9. So each one of those is 4 long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 1, 5 and 9. So then again, if I just articulate that in my right hand slowly, then that's going to go like this. It's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Do that a little bit quicker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Sorry, I'll do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And again, if we were going to give a spoken phrase for that, which could be really helpful, we might think of that as drive slowly in the snow. So that would be drive slowly in the snow. Drive slowly in the snow, which would give us this. Drive slowly in the snow. Drive slowly in snow. And if you watch what I'm doing there, I'm getting an even 4 with my thumb, and then I'm getting the triplets against it. Drive slowly in the snow. Drive slowly in the snow, like that. Okay? So finally, just to sum up, I might make 1 or 2 comments about interpretation. Inevitably, this is going to be personal because everybody that plays the piece is going to interpret it in a different way. But when I think about the piece, the first thing I think is that this piece is actually a song. And so for me, this means that for the most part, it's got to have a nice steady pulse to it. I think that there's a danger of using too much rubato and in the end effectively sounding like a kind of a bad opera singer, hamming it up too much and overusing rubato. Rubato is when, if you play a phrase, you might accelerate, speed up at the beginning of the phrase and then slow down towards the end, or vice versa. I think it's important to use a little bit of rubato with the piece, but also I think it can be overdone, and I think that if you do that, it rather spoils it. It doesn't work so well. It's also important to use dynamics to shape phrases as well. So, for instance, you might start a phrase softly and get loud and then go quieter again, so there'd be a crescendo and a diminuendo there, or vice versa. That helps shape a phrase and give the phrase emotional depth when you're playing. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, legato phrasing, this thing, is also very, very important, that you can totally ruin the piece by playing it too staccato and losing that connectivity between each note.